We're going to start with a conversation with our special guest today, Jana Eggers, CEO of Nara Logics. Jana, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. I'm honored to be asked.
Jana, let's start by having you introduce yourself and Nara Logics to our audience.
Of course. So my name is Jana Eggers, and I'm CEO of Nara Logics. I have been in the startup scene since my first job out of research science. I was a computer scientist mathematician before, and my first job was at a startup, and we were a 20-person logistics optimization system, and I've just jumped mainly from startup to startup there. I've had a few stints at large companies based on acquisitions, so this is my sixth startup. And I love it. I love what you're doing because entrepreneurs need help. There's so many different challenges in a startup and what you're trying to accomplish that having this kind of network and mentoring is really important. To tell you a little bit about Nara, we are in the artificial intelligence space, which has its pluses and minuses, of course. The plus is it's definitely a hot field. The minus is it's definitely a hot field. So there's a lot of hype and attention around it, which is sometimes good and sometimes bad. What we do is particularly enable enterprises. So as enterprises are going through digital transformation, meaning many enterprises are working to become technology companies themselves. They don't necessarily have the data that some of the AI requires, the data capabilities of how do you get that data in line and ready for AI, or the AI expertise. And so we offer a high-quality platform. It's been proven across many sectors to be able to solve some of the challenges for AI. Particularly, we're looking at, we call it the which problem, which order is going to have a problem, or which order should be accelerated, or, a lot of people look at it as recommendations, which product should be recommended to someone. We also work with the federal government, so in that case, which information that's coming in should go to which analyst. So we solved in particular that problem, that it's an optimization and kind of prediction problem, and we make it easy for enterprises to get engaged. So that's the quick version.
When did you start Nara Logics?
So Nara was actually founded in 2011. It had a different purpose. The idea there was more focused on re-indexing information for retrieval, and in particular it was they were thinking about being a new type of search engine, so you can see kind of where the overlap is on this which problem. In 2013, they had some enterprises come to them and ask them about licensing the platform for some different uses than the consumer approach. And in 2014, the company decided to do that. They looked for an executive that could do that kind of switch in company capabilities to how do you change from being, a platform that you operate yourself for consumers to something that actually large companies, enterprises can use and operate on their own. So we did didn't kind of change the name of the company a bit and built out the technology a bit more for that. So you can either, and this is not unusual, the reason why I'm telling you the story is this happens with startups on a fairly regular basis. Some people call it the pivot.
So you got involved when that pivot happened?
Exactly, 2014, about 3 years ago.
And was there revenue in the company at that point? The 2007 to 14 period, there was no revenue. It was just tinkering.
2011 to 2000. So the first 3 years, there wasn't really any revenue, and then we've changed that. It wasn't tinkering. It was more of a business model decision because a lot of consumer models aren't direct pay. They are advertising and partnership based. So that was they had planned, they knew that they wouldn't have revenue or any substantial revenue for a while. So that was, it was part of the plan to build up the consumer presence. And so, but again, at that stage, I think the team realized there was more opportunity in the enterprise space, and so spent about a year switching over to that, obviously pursuing some of the leads that we had already and getting some of those into implementation, then building out the platform to support. And really with the platform that we chose in that direction, we got our first customer live in end of 2014 into 2015, and then we continued to, fortunately, go live with people every year since.
So what is the go-to-market strategy? Well, how do you package your technology to solve customer problems, and how do you sell?
So we are direct sales right now. We're fortunate in that because of some of the work that we've done, we've gotten on several lists of being, high quality in AI, in particular for this. So we have a direct, marketing and sales model, which is fine. Our platform is, the licensing model is fairly substantial and grows within the enterprise. As far as our platform strategy, we have everything is containerized, and we use Docker for that, and so we can actually deploy. We do have our own hosting capabilities through AWS and GCP, but we can also go into other people's, their own virtual private cloud, whether they operate it or not, as long as they have a really a web-scaled type infrastructure that they can do. We don't really care.
So 2014, that's like pretty early in the AI, heat index, I guess is the way I would put it. In the last year or year and a half, it has really boomed, the whole AI hype. But 2014, it wasn't the case. Talk a little bit about what was it like to get into the market with an AI solution, and what kind of response were you getting?
So I was actually really excited. I worked, when I mentioned before, as a research scientist. So I worked out at Los Alamos, and I used AI. I wasn't an AI researcher, but I was doing computational chemistry work, and I was a theoretician doing some modeling, and I used artificial neural nets as well as genetic algorithms. And then when I switched into business after that, my first job out of research was with an expert systems. That logistics optimization company was using expert systems, which is basically where you build the rules, you code most of it in. And so I had a lot of experience and background, 30 years in AI and around AI, using AI as a tool. So, to your point, when I entered this in 2014, I was like, wow, I think AI is going to take off. I didn't think it was going to go that quickly, probably because I saw how slowly it took us to get to this point. And so I was more thinking, yes, we're early stage, but we're really well positioned with a very differentiated product, because to me, when I saw the system, two things stood out. One is this which problem is very much like an expert system, and expert systems are really difficult to build and have a lot of maintenance. And the way we do it, we're letting data figure it out. So it's kind of like a neural net in that way, but we're using some different proprietary algorithms. And so it's more of a self-assembling expert system based on data. The second thing is, because of the way we do it, it's transparent, so it's not black box. And so I know how many problems people have tried to solve with expert systems, but then they get unmaintainable. And then on the second side, even when you have those, they really have to be transparent. You have to know why the computer is giving you this answer. And so when I saw those two things, I felt like there was an opportunity in AI to really take off in a new way. I didn't quite expect the field to get so high. I thought that maybe 5 years coming, and it happened more about in 1 year. So that's a little bit of the differences because of my heritage and background. I probably had a bit of a different perspective from folks in general. So I knew it was coming, just not quite as fast.
You raised a rather large Series A. Could you take us through your early stage of business building and the corresponding financing strategy?
Yeah, and much of that was raised, not all of it, but the vast majority of it was raised for this consumer play. And that's really not that unusual in the consumer space, because a lot of it is, you know, you're not only investing in the technology, which is expensive to initially develop, but also the marketing to get out there. What's nice about where we are today is we're not quite as capital intensive because we don't have to get out and compete in all the consumer marketing challenges. Like I said, I don't even have a marketing person anymore. We've more invested in technology and grown on the technology side. You know, very fortunate that we don't need one, but again, I think that's because we came in early. So most of the capital went to build the underlying technology, and then also, you know, one fork of it for the marketing. Now we're in a, you know, obviously still using some of that investment, but also being funded by customers, which personally is a situation I like to be in.
I see. So you're saying that before you came, there was already money in the company that was raised for the consumer play, but since then you have not raised money. You're basically doing enterprise sales, and it's customers who are really helping you build the company, which is much healthier.
We've raised, it's less than 25% since I've been here of the full amount raised. So most of that was, again, to build the technology, which is not unsubstantial, and then also to do marketing, which we don't do anymore. So, and yes, and we have some in reserve, of course. So we have, it's a balance between, you know, slowing down how much that spend was happening, and then augmenting that with customers, like you said. I'm with you that it's a much healthier approach, because you really understand your value and where you're providing value, and that's a big communication from customers.
What is the business model? How do you charge customers?
So we're a little bit old school in that we just charge an annual license fee. So it is, you know, a recurring revenue. But right now, in particular, because of the size of the implementations, we're not really doing anything month to month. I think we'll get there. One of the things that I do want to build out is our ability to do self-serve, so that people can come and sign up and build prototypes for a smaller amount of money. But the instances that we're doing are large enough now. One of our customers, for example, has tens of millions of customers that are accessing the solution. That's on the consumer side. You know, we have some others that are much more on the information processing side that has, you know, tens of thousands of documents coming in a day, but their user set is only a few hundred. So so most of our sales are more, you know, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars for a year, which doesn't really make sense on the monthly side. These people aren't committing to systems that are something that, hey, well, I'm going to see how it works out. That said, we want to get to where you can do prototypes and, you know, sign up for 3 months, or, you know, maybe again, even month to month, try and build something like that, make sure that it works, and then deploy. But most of our customers, they've already decided what they're going to do. They're committing to something like this, and we're an enabler to get there faster.
And how much professional services do you have to do to make these customer instances work?
It's a great question, because it is a big challenge in the AI industry in particular. Most of the professional services that we see, and also that I just hear in the industry, I was out at the O'Reilly AI conference last week talking to people about this. so much of the professional services are really spent around the data and getting the data prepped and ready, transformed is what we call it, to go into the AI system. And you hear anywhere from 2/3 to 75%. Sometimes I think it's even more than that. Our system really does that in an automated fashion. It's one of the unique properties that we have is we call it, we build the data connectome, and we use the connectome term because it's a term from neuroscience where we got our roots. And it's basically your connectome is how your neurons connect, and so they called it that, comparing it to the genome, which is the genome is your nature, the connectome is your nurture, and that's our point is we're learning from the data that you have in your company and building the system based on that. And because of that, we actually don't have a lot of professional services. No one on our team has a title of services consultant or anything like that. Our product managers and our engineers absolutely help our customers get going, but our proud moments and our moments of achievement are when they can do it themselves. So we really, as I mentioned with this self-serve model, and we have customers that have done that, which is exciting. They, we're excited to see they'll launch in a new region. As I mentioned, a customer before, they're worldwide with us. They launch in a new region without us even knowing. And so it's exciting to see that theory is working out in play. That said, when we get started, there is a fair amount of time teaching them the system, and we definitely need to get better at that.
If you look across your different customers, is there a use case or two that is dominant that people are buying your product for?
Yeah, I'd say there's two main ones. The first one is what people traditionally think of as a recommendation engine. So it's particularly personalized. So for this customer, what should I put in front of them? And that can be a product, it can be media, it can be content, it can be an offer, but it's really the same thing. I think the challenge is when you expand to something like content that you have or even marketing campaigns, that doesn't go really well with the current collaborative filtering approach that you have when you have lots of products and lots of sales, because you don't have, so one example is one of our customers, an airline customer, they wanted to figure out which credit card offer to which customer, because they have lots of different credit card offerings. And so the question there is you don't have the data that you would have in a collaborative filtering type situation, because you need masses of, if they did this, they would do this. And we work well in that environment. So it's kind of, think of it as a recommendation engine, but very much expanded and able to work in different cases. So that's one, the personalized offering space, if you will. And then the other side is really decision support. So another customer, medical products company, and they have, because they work with insurance companies, they can have various things go wrong with an order, and they need to make sure that they're going to get remittance from the insurance company, and lots of qualification there. Well, right now they have a rules-based system, as I mentioned, kind of an expert system that they've developed in their system, but it's really hard to maintain, and it covers all the low-hanging fruit, and it actually does that well in our testing because we compared our system to that one. But what it doesn't get is when you have 17 different things that go wrong with an order versus the top 5 things. And so that's what we're doing for them is, we're finding those orders that something's going to go wrong with, again, the which orders problem, that they normally would have built out an expert system for, but they just can't build one out that's as encompassing as what we do. So I'd say on the back end side, it's traditionally what was called decision support. And then on the front end, it's really personalization. So those are the two groupings with a little bit of, shaking out some of the baggage that comes with each of those.
What is your game plan? Do you continue to grow organically with customer revenue at this point, or are you looking to raise funding and accelerate? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that honestly we talk about almost every week. As we get more customers in, it's like, well, gosh, are we waiting too long? Are we being too conservative? You know, can someone else come in? And it's not an easy decision. We are talking with some investors now, and we're open to investment, but it's got to be the right investment for us. And, you know, because, and you brought it up, because we have a fair amount of money in, that's a bit of an overhang. And so, you know, how much equity do we give up to get more money in, you know, relative to that, and what's happened versus how much we can do ourselves with the, you know, customer financing, if you will, in the sense that they're
you had
paying
what,
the bills.
about $20 million in the first Series A before the enterprise
15.
strategy kicked in gear? 15?
Not 2015 yet.
15. Fair amount of money.
It is, but, you know, you look at Palantir before they took off, took in $50 million, right? So for a pretty complex system like ours, that's not an unusual number. I think the challenge is not all of that went into this business that we're currently in, and that's more where the balance is.
Pivots are always expensive equity-wise. You know, we've done case study after case study of pivots where, you know, you take a round of financing, a sizable round of financing, and that strategy doesn't work out. You have to reset and start over on a different strategy. In the meantime, your equity has gotten diluted substantially on that first strategy. This is a very common issue that you will have to navigate through. Switching gears, what is your experience as a female CEO of a technology startup?
So this is kind of the 2.5 times that I've done this, the 2.5, if you will. So I also was a CEO of a Excel Ventures-backed company called Spreadshirt for 4 years, 2006 to 2010, and then before that, I was the general manager of a startup within a big company. And so had the, you know, CEO-like role there, managing the P&L and all of the resources. You know, I think it's somewhat hard for me in that I've always been in science and technology, in the sense that, you know, my career, I started out as a research scientist, and I was out at Los Alamos, and I did NSF research, National Science Foundation research before that, and I was typically the only woman in the room. So in some senses, I think that helped me because I kind of grew up with it and I didn't notice some things. It's definitely different in the business world. Scientists are, you know, not immune, but it's maybe a little bit more collaborative in approach, and I think that we often get in a more competitive business situation just by nature, and I think that, you know, women tend to be more collaborative, so it's been interesting dealing with some of that. You know, I've certainly had I won a pitch contest, for example, once, and I've had the sexist comments where, you know, someone said afterwards, well, you know why you won, it's because of the way you look.
What was the code, Cindy?
And
sorry, Jana, somebody interrupted. Maureen is going to mute him. Go ahead. Keep going, please.
No worries. So, you know, there's some of that happens, which is very unfortunate. So I think we just have, you know, across the genders, we have different approaches to things, and I wish they were respected and celebrated a bit more on each side. it hasn't been, I can't say that it's always been delightful or that it's definitely not been an advantage to be female, but we all have our disadvantages.
Do you think there is bias against women entrepreneurs?
Yes.
Elaborate.
I mean, I think it's pretty much been shown in many cases. There was a fairly recent study.
Just a second, Jana. Maureen, the people are coming on and disrupting the call nonstop. Can you please mute people? Ankit Raj is now disrupting the call. Go ahead. Sorry, Jana.
Sure, no worries. So I think that, you know, there's been several studies. One is in, recent one was out of Sweden, which is a very gender neutral society overall. I've spent a fair amount of time over there, and I was even shocked to see that in their VC, this is their government VC, the differences in questions that are asked and the comments that were made. And I do think that's the norm. I mean, I know I have seen many of the male pitches and female pitches, you know, at different VCs and around, and I am surprised at feedback and questions that I hear females ask versus the males. And it seems that, you know, there's a fair number of VCs that don't even realize. I was speaking with someone last night, and he was surprised. I'm at a conference right now, and he was surprised to hear some comments from a couple of women that were at the table saying, well, you did notice that this person on the stage said, well, I know, you know, a person who's just a mom, and she turned out to be a great entrepreneur. And we were kind of like, how do you even say just a mom? And then, you know, say, and she did it, why can't you? You know, it really was tone deaf. And he said, you know what, I didn't even notice when that was said. And he said, I'm really glad that you guys called that out the table so I become more aware. And I think most people, you know, again, we don't kind of notice when some of those things are said. Like I said, I know that I remember the time when I won the pitch contest, and it was because of the way I looked, and that hurt. Honestly, I went and threw the ward away that night because I was like, fuck you, I don't want any, sorry. But I don't want anyone thinking that I'm not going to go brag about this because I've now had someone dirty that for me, right? And so I was like, I'm not going to go talk about this. And I didn't kind of really even think about that, honestly, much that after that, until someone asked me about, you know, when were times I'd been discriminated against, and I sat down and I actually wrote a list, and that was one that came up, and I thought, why did I do that? I mean, it was a long time ago, but I wouldn't do it now. I'd be like, yeah, I won that pitch contest, yeah, because I'd realize, I think then I was more insecure, and I thought, oh my gosh, what if it was because of how I looked and not how I did? And I think now I have a lot more confidence to say this. That doesn't mean I'm not impacted by bias. It doesn't mean that, you know, someone's not taking me as seriously as they take, you know, a male entrepreneur.
Do you see bias in your customers?
No, I don't really. I from our customers, I have to say, I see a lot more support. You know, I think there's some cultural differences because we do work with, we do have global customers, and I see some of that. But overall, I'm really proud of the customers we're working with, and I have found them to be much more, you know, it makes us feel great to work with you, and they want to promote it more, and they want to grow it more within the company, and they have me come and talk to their executives. And so, I mean, part of that may be that enlightenment on the big companies' perspectives, but I really don't see it from customers at all.
So I've had this conversation about bias and so forth with many female entrepreneurs, and my conclusion, and I would say my advice to the younger women who are doing this is that focus on the customers, get validation, get traction, and if you are going into investor meetings with customers, they don't mess with you.
Yeah,
if you don't
I think
go in with the goods, that's when people start messing with you.
I think so. I think, and I absolutely agree with that. And that's why we're having some very productive conversations with investors now, because of our customer traction. I think it still does, even in the conversations that I have, because I, sit there and look at some of the funding that's happening, there's still a question of how do you scale, and so many VCs understandably are focused on the big wins and how they scale faster. And so you still have some of it there of, yeah, I've proven that I can get these big customers and get them to sign up for large contracts and get them into production, which, by the way, a lot of AI is not in production now. I think those are all big steps, and it's absolutely why we can have some serious conversations. That said, again, I think you still enter it into some of that bias of, can she lead for scale? Will she be, again, because women will tend to be more cooperative. I think they don't consider women aggressive enough on the scale side, which I don't think is fair. I mean, to me, it's like, I don't really even care. I know there's studies out there that say this and that. It's so much there's so much of a spread there, but those answers are so much in the spread that it's silly to even say. I mean, who gives a crap if women may be a little bit, less aggressive on this? That doesn't mean that every woman is. And so you find the right people, and there's plenty of men that are less aggressive than me. I mean,
But I think the question of can this entrepreneur or can this early stage CEO scale to the later stage level of scaling is asked of men as well. I've spent a lot of time in the venture capital world, so that this is not a question that is only asked of women. It's a question that VCs ask of all founders. So I'm just, pushing back a little bit because, you can take it as discrimination, or you can just take it as that VCs are doing their job of evaluating whether this entrepreneur or this early stage CEO is going to scale to the next stage or not.
Oh, I'm not offended by the questions. It's how the questions are asked and whose answers they believe more. So if I give the same answer as a male, is the male going to be believed more because they have biases that women are not as aggressive as men, just as one example. So I'm not judging whether or not they should be asking that question. My only point was, to your point about the customer, it's not always just that you have traction with the customer. It's do you have the traction that shows that you can scale? And so it's not just at one stage, it's at multiple stages that bias can come up.
Fair enough. Fair enough.